The first shot hit my shoulder before I even heard the sound that caused it. 1 second I was moving through the trench, and the next I was on the ground, staring at the gray sky above the moon base, wondering why my arm would not listen to me anymore. I am Daniel Foss. I was a logistics sergeant, which means I was supposed to be far away from anything like this. My job was supplies, transport routes, and endless paperwork. But the evacuation at Thren Ridge fell apart in less than 10 minutes, and somewhere between the chaos and the smoke, I lost my unit. That is how I ended up alone in a narrow supply trench with a sidearm, 4 spare magazines, and a patrol of Kreth soldiers who thought they had found an easy target. The Kreth are tall, gray-skinned, and calm in a way that used to unsettle everyone who fought them. Their nervous system is different from ours. When they are hurt, their body shuts down function around the injury almost right away. Clean, controlled, almost polite, if pain can ever be polite. They expected the same shutdown from me. The second shot caught my vest and cracked something in my chest. I felt it properly this time, a sharp burning line that stole the air right out of my lungs. I dropped behind a supply crate, my ears ringing, my mind trying to catch up with what was happening to my own body. For a moment, I almost believed this was the end. Then something in me refused to accept that idea. I was scared, yes, but somewhere underneath the fear, a colder feeling was rising. Not the kind of anger you see in movies, with shouting and wild motion. This was quiet, focused. The anger of someone who has had an extremely difficult day and has decided that this will not be the day it gets any worse. The third shot cracked into the crate just above my head, spraying dust into my eyes. I used the half-second, while the soldier reloaded to lean out and fire twice into the gap in his armor plating. He dropped immediately, clearly surprised that I was still moving, still fighting, still breathing. There were more of them. I counted at least 4 remaining shapes moving through the smoke, calling out to each other in short clicking sounds. My hands were shaking, but my mind had gone strangely still, like the eye of a storm. The fourth shot hit my leg as I pushed myself up and forward instead of backward. Later, I would realize that decision saved my life, because retreating in that narrow trench would have given them a clear line to finish things. Moving forward confused them. It was not what their training expected from an injured opponent. I laughed, though it came out broken and short. It was not the reaction of someone enjoying himself. It was the reaction of someone who could not quite believe his own stubbornness. Again, I thought. Really? You are going to have to do better than that. I kept moving. I emptied what remained of my magazine toward the 2 nearest shapes, then dropped it, and slammed in a fresh one with hands that would not stay steady. My side was burning, my leg barely supporting my weight, but stopping did not feel like an option anymore. Somewhere deep inside, an old instinct had taken control. One older than training, older than rank, older than any uniform. It said one simple thing: keep going. The fifth shot grazed my side. I barely registered it in the moment. I only noticed the sting long after the fighting had gone quiet, when I finally allowed myself to sit down against a fallen piece of armor plating and catch my breath. 4 Kreth soldiers lay motionless around me. I stared at them, breathing hard, trying to understand how I was the one still sitting upright. A 6th Kreth soldier found me, about 20 minutes later, when my own side finally pushed their line back through the trench. He did not raise his weapon. He simply stood there, staring at me, with something between confusion and disbelief, the same way someone might stare at an animal that kept walking long after it should have stopped. He was taken as a prisoner soon after, and during questioning, he said something that stayed with researchers for a long time afterward. He said the human would not stop being angry, and that his side never expected a body could keep functioning through so much damage while still fighting with full intention. They understood our biology on paper. They did not understand what happens when a person refuses to give in. That refusal is not something special to me. I want to be honest about that, because I have heard people call me brave, and the truth is more complicated. I am not built differently from anyone else. I do not have special training or unusual strength. What happened in that trench came from something much older than any single person. Humans have spent thousands of years surviving worse conditions than a battlefield on a distant moon. We have been chased, injured, starved, and pushed past every reasonable limit, and somewhere in that long history, our bodies and minds developed a strange kind of stubbornness. When the danger becomes serious enough, something inside many of us simply refuses to accept defeat. It took 6 weeks for the doctors to fully repair the damage from that day. I now carry a neat row of marks across my side and shoulder, small reminders of a fight I barely remember clearly. My superiors gave me a medal for what happened, but I rarely look at it. It feels like it belongs to whoever was left standing in that trench once the fear disappeared and the calm anger took its place, not to the version of me sitting quietly at a desk months later. The Kreth military eventually created an entire research division dedicated to understanding what they began calling the human refusal response. They studied recorded footage, medical scans, and testimonies from soldiers on both sides. Their scientists tried to model exactly how much damage a human body could absorb while still functioning at full combat capacity. What they found surprised them even more than the trench encounter itself. It was not really about physical toughness. It was about intention. A human under extreme pressure does not evaluate the situation the way their soldiers do. We do not calculate probability of survival in the middle of a fight. We focus entirely on the next second, and then the one after that, refusing to let go of whatever we are trying to protect, whether that is a mission, a friend, or simply our own life. I met one of their researchers later, during a diplomatic gathering after the ceasefire. She asked me directly how I managed to keep moving after the 4th shot. I told her the truth. I did not manage anything. I simply never allowed myself the option of stopping. There was no clever strategy, no hidden reserve of strength I called upon. There was only the decision, made somewhere below conscious thought, that giving up was not something I was willing to do in that moment. She wrote that answer down carefully, and I remember her saying that it did not match anything in their behavioral models. Their soldiers are trained to withdraw once damage reaches a certain threshold, because continuing to fight past that point is considered inefficient and unnecessarily risky. From their perspective, my continued resistance appeared almost illogical. From my perspective, it felt like the only thing that made sense. That is, in the end, the story of how a supply sergeant who never expected to see real combat ended up defeating 4 trained soldiers while carrying 5 separate injuries. Not through skill, not through luck alone, but through a stubborn refusal, buried somewhere deep in human nature, one that our former enemies still struggle to fully understand. Sometimes, when people ask me what it felt like in those final minutes, I tell them it felt like anger and calm existing together at the same time. Anger at the unfairness of being ambushed. Calm because somewhere inside, I had already decided the outcome before it happened. I was not going to stop moving, no matter what. The war between us and the Kreth ended not long after that, through negotiations rather than continued conflict. Many of the reports from that final year mention encounters similar to mine. Moments where human soldiers pushed past what should have been their physical limits, simply because giving up was never seriously considered. Historians on both sides now often reference these events when explaining why the war concluded the way it did. As for me, I returned home eventually, carrying scars that occasionally ache when the weather turns colder. I do not think of myself as extraordinary. I think of myself as an ordinary person who, in one extraordinary moment, discovered something about human nature that I never expected to learn about myself. If there is one thing I hope people take from my experience, it is this. Strength is not always about size or power. Sometimes it is simply about refusing to accept an ending you have not chosen yet. That refusal, more than any weapon or training, is what carried me through that day. And it is something every person carries somewhere inside them. waiting for the moment it becomes necessary. I still think about the young Kreth soldier who found me in that trench, the disbelief clear across his features as he realized I was still breathing, still alert, still ready to keep fighting if needed. I think about how strange it must have seemed to him, watching something that should have stopped simply continue on, powered by nothing more than sheer determination. Maybe that is the real difference between us and them, not our biology, not our weapons, just that quiet, stubborn refusal to stop, even when every reasonable calculation says we should. And maybe that is exactly why, in the end, we were the ones still standing.